I am Reed, I am 27, just an average dude. I've made tons of money mistakes in my 20s, and now I want to share everything I've learned to help you take control of your finances and your life. Look, if you are anything like me and you've spent countless nights scrolling through YouTube and TikTok looking for ways to escape the 9 to 5 grind, you probably heard the same story over and over again. You need a six-figure job, you need a side hustle pulling in 10 grand a month, you need to work harder, get promoted, climb that corporate ladder until you finally hit that magical $100,000 a year, and then boom, you are free. We all heard it right. Work harder, get that raise. Keep pushing. That is what success looks like. That is what we've been told since we were kids, but here's the thing that nobody actually tells you. And I learned this one the hard way. You do not need a six-figure salary to break out of the system. In fact, I know people making $40,000 a year who live with more actual freedom than people pulling in close to $200,000 a year. And I am not just talking theoretical here. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've lived it. And today I want to show you exactly how that works, and more importantly, how you can escape the paycheck to paycheck trap without waiting for some magical salary number. Because the system, honestly, it is not about money, it is about control. And once you understand how it really works, you realize you already have more power in your hands than you think you do. So let me start with a story about my own dumb mistakes, because that is how I learned this lesson. Back when I was 22, 23 years old, I was living that classic broke young adult life. I had a job that paid me just enough to get by, but not enough to actually get ahead. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I had credit card debt piling up. I was eating out way too much, buying clothes I didn't need, going out on weekends and spending money like it was nothing. And honestly, I was miserable. But here's the weird part. At the time, I kept telling myself the same thing. Once I make more money, everything will be fine. Once I get that promotion, once I land that better paying job, I'll finally be able to breathe. Sound familiar, right? So I got lucky. I landed a job that paid me significantly more than what I was making before. I thought, this is it. This is the moment. I am finally going to get my life together, but guess what happened? Within a few months, I was still broke. Actually, I felt even more trapped than before. How was that possible? I was making more money than I ever had in my life, and I felt like I was running even harder on that treadmill. And that is when I realized the painful truth. It was about the money. It was about me. It was about my habits. It was about my mindset. And it was about something called lifestyle creep, which I am sure you've heard of before. So let us talk about why so many people actually feel stuck. And I am sure you probably know a person who has done this 1 or 2 times, maybe even yourself. Look, they get a raise, maybe they make an extra $5,000 to $10,000 a year if they were lucky. And for a moment, they feel good. They tell themselves they were finally making progress. And then the typical story happens. They go and upgrade their car. They move into a slightly nicer apartment. They start going out to eat more. They rack up credit card debt. They start buying better clothes, planning more expensive vacations. And guess what? That person is still broke, but now they just broke making more money. And this is called lifestyle creep, and it is a trap. And I am telling you, I fell for it hard when I got that raise. I immediately upgraded my lifestyle. I got a nicer car. I moved into a place with higher rent. I was eating out almost every day. And at the end of the month, I was looking at my bank account, wondering where all the money went. I had nothing to show for it. And the worst part was I felt more anxious than ever because now I had more bills to pay and more expenses to maintain. So if I lost that job, I would be in even deeper trouble. Does that sound like freedom to you? No, it sounds like a golden cage. And here's the truth. It doesn't matter if you make $40,000 a year or $80,000 or $150,000. If you're spending almost every single penny that you earn, you are always going to feel like you are running on a treadmill. And the worst part is the system is designed to make you think that is normal. Social media is programmed to make us think that this is just what adulthood looks like. Ads constantly tell you to upgrade your life. You deserve it. That new car, you deserve it. That vacation, you deserve it. That designer bag, you deserve it. And social media is always showing you highlight reels of people flexing their new purchases, going on trips, buying just materialistic stuff. Meanwhile, banks and credit cards make it super easy nowadays to borrow money. So you can live this lifestyle that you technically cannot afford. And so, yeah, you can make 6 figures and still feel trapped. I've seen people making serious money living paycheck to paycheck because their lifestyle grew faster than their income. And that is the real problem. So which raises the real question, if making more money is the answer, then what the heck is the answer? And there is a couple different ways we can look at this, but the truth is escaping the 9 to 5 really does not correlate completely to how much you actually earn. It is about the gap between what you earn and what you spend, and some people like to call that the freedom gap. Let me break this down with a simple example because I am a visual guy and this really helped me understand it. So imagine 2 different people. We have person A. Person A makes $40,000 a year and they spend $25,000 a year. That is a $15,000 gap money they can save, invest, and use to buy back their time. Now, person B makes $120,000 a year, which sounds amazing, right? But they spend $118,000 a year. So their gap is only $2,000. They might look rich on social media. They might drive a nice car. They might live in a fancy apartment. But in reality, they still trapped. They one missed paycheck away from disaster. So which person is actually closer to freedom? It is not the person with the higher salary. It is the person with the bigger gap. And I know the $40,000 a year spending only $25,000 a year example is realistic for everyone, especially depending on where you live. But that is not the point. The point is that person has a much bigger gap than the person making 120,000 and spending 118,000. And that gap is what gives you options to save, options to invest, options to say no to things that burn you out and drain you. Because freedom is about the magical income number that we all chase. It is about how much control you have over your life and your expenses. Now I want to get personal here for a second because I think this is where a lot of the advice online misses the mark. A lot of these finance gurus will tell you to just make more money, go get a raise, start a business, grind harder, and look, I am not saying that is bad advice. Making more money is great. I love making more money. But here's what nobody tells you. If you don't fix the spending side of the equation, first making more money will actually make things worse. I know because I lived it. When I got that raise, I thought I had arrived, but I hadn't changed anything about my mindset. I was still the same impulsive spender with the same bad habits, I just had more fuel to burn. And that is why so many people who win the lottery end up broke within a few years. It is not about the money, it is about the person handling the money. So before you chase that big salary, chase your spending habits first. Get that under control then, and only then should you worry about increasing your income. So how do we start actually building that freedom gap? Well, in my opinion, the fastest way to do this is not about making more money. I know that sounds counterintuitive, especially in a world where everyone is screaming at you to start a side hustle and make passive income, but hear me out. If you go online, a lot of people will tell you the first thing you should do is increase your income. And while I think increasing your income is amazing, it is not the fastest way to attack that freedom gap. In my opinion, you need to start by needing less. And this is where the real work begins. So first step, you need to audit your spending. And I don't mean just glancing at your bank account once a month. I mean sitting down for an hour, going through every single transaction and figuring out where your money is going. Look at your fixed costs. These are your biggest expenses, your rent or your mortgage, your car payments, your insurance, your subscriptions, all those random subscriptions you signed up for and forgot about, that streaming service you haven't used in months. That gym membership you never use, that meal kit delivery that is sitting on your counter. Cut it all. And I am not saying you need to live like a monk. I am not saying you need to be miserable, but be honest with yourself. Are you actually using that stuff, or are you just paying for it out of habit? Let me give you a real example from my own life. I used to spend about $200 a month eating out for lunch at work. Just lunch, not breakfast, not dinner, not weekend meals, just lunch during the work week. That is about $10 a day, 20 days a month, and I thought nothing of it because it was just lunch. But when I actually looked at the numbers, I realized that $200 a month was $2,400 a year. And for what? For convenience. For not taking 15 minutes to pack a sandwich in the morning. And once I started bringing my own lunch, I saved that money and put it straight into my savings. And that felt way better than any takeout sandwich ever did. So every dollar you do not spend is a dollar you do not have to earn at your job. And that is the mindset shift you need. Think about it this way. If you can go through your expenses and cut $300 a month from your lifestyle, and I am sure plenty of people can cut way more than that, let's just say $300. That could be going out less on weekends, maybe cutting back on drinking because alcohol is ridiculously expensive, maybe canceling subscriptions you don't use, maybe cooking at home more often. That $300 a month is the same as giving yourself a $3,600 raise, but without working any extra hours and without doing anything extra. You just kept more of the money you already earned, and that is a superpower. Honestly, the more you lower your fixed costs, the less dependent you are on a high salary to survive. If you can live comfortably unless suddenly you have breathing room, you are not terrified of losing your job. You are not glued to every paycheck. You start to build choices for yourself, and having choices, that is the beginning of freedom. Now, I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people skip over, and that is the psychological side of this whole thing. When I was in my early 20s, I had this scarcity mindset. I felt like I never had enough. And so when I did have money, I spent it quickly because I was afraid it would disappear. I didn't trust that more money would come. And that led me to make some really stupid decisions. I've bought things I didn't need. I've gone on trips I couldn't afford. I've treated my friends to dinners when I barely had rent money, all because I wanted to feel like I had enough. But here's what I learned. The feeling of enough doesn't come from having more. It comes from wanting less. And I know that sounds like some cheesy self-help quote, but it is true. When I finally sat down and figured out what I actually needed to be happy, and it was a lot less than I thought, I stopped chasing things that didn't matter. And that is when my finances started to turn around. So step 2, once your expenses are under control, is to build a safety net. And I've talked about this before on this channel, but it is worth repeating because it is that important. When I say build a safety net, I am talking about 3 to 6 months of living expenses just sitting in a boring high-yield savings account, not cryptocurrency, not single stocks, not an ETF. Just boring liquid cash that you can access whenever you need it. And this matters psychologically more than you think. When you have a small cushion to fall back on, suddenly you are not scared of losing your job. You are not forced to stay in burnt-out situations. You are not desperate for that next paycheck. All of a sudden, you have breathing room. And that breathing room changes how you make decisions. You start thinking long-term instead of just waiting for that next Friday to hit so you can see your paycheck come in. And I know saving 3 to 6 months of expenses sounds impossible, especially if you are living paycheck to paycheck right now, but you don't have to do it all at once. Start small. Even if it is just 1 month of living expenses at first, that is still progress. That is more than most people have. If it takes you 3 months or 6 months or even a full year to save that cushion, that is okay. It is still proof that you are building a foundation of stability, and that foundation of stability is not something a lot of people have. The system does not want you to have it. The system wants you dependent. The system wants you scared. The system wants you to keep working and spending and borrowing, but when you build that cushion, you break that cycle, you are no longer a cog in the machine. You are a person with options. So by this point, we V-audited our expenses, we V-cut back where we can, we V-built a little safety cushion of cash. Now, what do we do with the extra money that is coming in? Do we buy a nice new car? Do we upgrade our apartment? Do we splurge on a vacation number? None of that. The truth is, we don't do any of that. What we do is we invest, even if it is small amounts. And you've heard me say this multiple times on this channel, but I'll say it again because it is that important. If you are waiting until you make $100,000 a year to start investing, you will never feel quote-unquote ready. There will always be a reason to wait. I need to pay off this debt first. I need to save for a house first. I need to get that promotion first. And before you know it, 10 years have passed and you haven't invested a single dollar. So start now. It can be $5 a month. It can be $10 a month. It can be $50 a month. The amount doesn't matter as much as the habit does. You want to build that momentum. You want to make investing a normal part of your life, just like paying rent or buying groceries. Let me make this tangible for you because numbers help me understand things. Let's say you invest $100 a month into a simple index fund with an average 8% return in 20 years. That is about $60,000, and I am willing to bet most of you can find $100 a month to invest. That is about $330 a day. Skip one coffee and one takeout meal, and you are there. Now, if you double that to $200 a month, you are looking at about $120,000 in 20 years. That is $50 a week. And here's the wild part. Most of that growth isn't even from what you put in. It is from compound interest. You are not putting in $120,000. You are putting in way less than that, and the market does the heavy lifting. So while everyone else is buying a new car every 2 years to look rich and keep up with the Joneses, you are quietly stacking wealth in the background. And let me tell you something that nobody tells you about this process. It is actually kind of boring, and that is the beauty of it. Real wealth building is boring. It is not exciting. It is not flashy. You are not going to post about it on Instagram, but 10 years down the road, you are going to look at your account and realize you V-built something real. Now, this is the part where things get fun, in my opinion. We V-audited our expenses, we have a safety cushion, we started investing. What else can we do to break the system? Well, this is where you can get creative because once you V-lowered your costs, built that safety net, and started investing, your freedom gap starts growing. And when you have a true gap, you unlock something most people will never experience. It is called optionality. Optionality means you are no longer forced to make decisions out of fear. You can say no to a toxic job or a toxic environment without panicking because you know you have savings to fall back on. You can take time off to travel or plan your next move without worrying about how you are going to pay rent. And my personal favorite, you can choose to start a side hustle or a business because you are not worried about that next payment. You have the freedom to explore. Think about it. If your bills are $2,000 a month and you are making $3,500, you only have $1,500 in breathing room. That is not bad, but it is not great either. But what if you can cut your expenses from $2,000 a month down to $1,500 and find a way to make an extra $500 on the side? Now you are stacking $2,000 every single month. In 1 year, that is $24,000 saved. And that type of cushion can literally change your entire life. That is a down payment on a house. That is a year of living expenses. That is the freedom to quit your job and try something new. And this is how regular people you see on the street break the system. It is not overnight. It is not by winning the lottery. It is by creating a gap, using that gap to buy your own time, and then using that time to build something that gives you even more freedom. I want to share a quick personal story about this because I think it really illustrates the point. When I first started getting my finances together, I was working a job that I really didn't like. It was draining me mentally and emotionally, but I felt trapped because I needed the paycheck. I couldn't just quit and figure things out later because I had no savings, I had no cushion. I was living hand to mouth, and that feeling of being stuck is one of the worst feelings in the world. You know, you need to leave, but you can't because you don't have options. So I made a plan.